And we're back on record. Very good. Okay, so again, number 2 Upper Castle Street is where Alice Curtayne was born, and her sister Bridie opened a sweet shop there in that property, and now today, as all Tralee people will know, they will know Ben Hur's Hotel, which is at the same at that location now. So I'm going to move on now. So that was the sort of start of Alice's kind of life. And I know this is a kind of a whistle-stop tour, so bear with me. We're going to kind of move on now to the, I'll take a quick sup of tea. I'm going to move on now to the sort of late teens, 1920s. And Alice spent time in Southampton, UK, Milan in Italy, and she then went back to Liverpool. And we'll talk a little bit about each of those times for Alice. Alice was sent to Southampton in England to the Sisters of the Holy Union, to a teacher training college. And I'll just tell you a little bit about St. Anne's in Southampton. Was established in 1881 and set up as a convent boarding school for young ladies. The religious orders to which the sisters belonged had been established in 1826 to provide religious education for poor children. In 1904, a residential training college for teachers was established at the school. So Alice's teenage education was in Southampton. And Jean-Baptiste Debrant was born in 1801, and he was the founder of the Religious of the Holy Sisters. And I found this quote here. Alice wrote this book in 1936 on Jean-Baptiste, and in the foreword she writes, "I myself was taught by the Sisters of the Holy Union St. Anne's in Southampton during all the formative years of life. It was a holy nun who first convinced my hesitant mind that I had some ability in English and that it conceivably might be a duty rightly to develop and use that talent. I remember the sisters as kindly and full of human understanding. They were unwavering in their presentment of the Catholic ideal. They kept our days filled with interest, tranquil, as I think the years of girlhood should be." And I can only hope that it was tranquil for her, because it can't have been easy as a young teenager in her mid-teens to go from Tralee in Kerry all the way over to Southampton back in the 20s. I mean, that was a big trip, I think, then. So I find I was delighted to find that piece. Here's Alice in her, maybe we could call it her prime, I don't know, but this is Alice in the 1920s. And I'd like to just share with you a little anecdote about this particular photograph. You can see it there on the screen. We only ever had copies of this photograph, or copies of this photograph, and we never actually had the real photograph up until about 4 months ago. And we were in the middle of putting together a presentation plaque for Alice, and I'll show you that later. And I got a letter, an email from a lady in England who found it as she was cleaning out her aunt's estate. And the lady's name was Mary Smiley. And she said, "Would you like the photograph?" And this photograph, in all its beauty and clarity, came in the post, and we were delighted to get it. So it's a professionally taken photograph. It was taken in Milan in 1922 as part of, we suspect, or I do anyway, maybe publication, not publication, but promotion for her first book, which I'm going to talk about now in a minute. But before I do, let's go back then from Milan. We go back to, and sorry, in Milan, she worked as a secretary for quite some time. 4 years, I think she was there. Then she moved back to Liverpool, where she became very involved in the Catholic Evidence Guild. And I think she's mentioned this herself, that the Catholic Evidence Guild is where she got her speaking skills from. For those who may not know, the Catholic Evidence Guild is an international association of Roman Catholic lay volunteers that seeks to research and present clear and compelling explanations of the doctrine of the Roman Catholic Church. Their objective is to address incorrect impressions about the Church and its teachings. Now, as a member of the Catholic Evidence Guild, she met up with Frank Sheed and Maisie Ward, who were prominent members of the Catholic Evidence Guild. And Sheed and Ward ended up setting up a publishing house. Excuse me, Sheed and Ward was a publishing house founded in London in 1926 by Catholic activists Frank Sheed and Maisie Ward. The head office was moved to New York in 1933. I can't see what I've written because it's blocked. Excuse me. Okay, you get the point. So she became involved with Frank Sheed and Maisie Ward, and they ended up encouraging her to write more. Specifically, her first book, her first publication was Catherine of Siena. And Catherine of Siena was first published in 1929, and there were 7 impressions printed between 1929 and 1934. I had to study and find out what impressions were versus editions. Those of you who are in the book world will know, but an impression is a little bit different to an edition, because an impression is printed from the first edition. Anyway, maybe that's too technical. The good news, however, is that in 2022, some 93 years after the publication of this book, St. Catherine of Siena, it's being republished next year by Cluny Media. And I'll speak a little bit more about Cluny Media in a few minutes. And this to me is amazing. After such a, surely it stands to the writer that she was, that if a book, because a lot of the writing you'll read 93 years ago might not kind of transfer into today, but clearly it does, the use of language, the phraseology, but it does. And that's been proven because her books are being reprinted. We're fairly sure that this book, Catherine of Siena, was probably her most successful book. And it was printed in English, of course, Italian. This one here on the right is, we believe, Portuguese. And I haven't confirmed it, but I think it was also published in French. Just a few book reviews here on Catherine of Siena. Written by an Irish woman and meticulously researched, this not only gives one insight into a singularly influential woman, but also the political environment in which she worked to prevent the Great Schism in the Catholic Church. Her work was to end in failure in her lifetime, but she is remarkable as a mystic without formal education, who had the ear of 2 people. The book is a compelling read. I think it's interesting here. I think one of Alice's connections, if you will, with Catherine of Siena was without formal education. I think Alice was aware that she didn't have formal education. It was something that came up a bit. Another book review here. That's another book review. I'm conscious of time now. I'm just going to skip that one if that's okay. I was just joking there with Cara a minute ago that I was putting the final touches on my presentation, and I had a little panic moment. I realized I didn't have a bibliography done. And I was like, if you're going to talk about a writer, you have to have a bibliography, surely. So it's as accurate as I could do it in, I think, 15 minutes. So this is Alice Curtayne's bibliography. Her first publication was in 1929, and her last one here, which was actually an edited book, was 1974. But you can see there, Born on the Wind was a book of short stories, Patrick Sarsfield. House of Cards was her one and only novel. And actually, for those of you interested in learning more, I'll speak about that again, but House of Cards, although she never says it, autobiographical, gives a great insight into Alice, I think. It talks about a young woman leaving Ireland, going to Italy, etc. I'm missing a slide here. Let me just pause and think for a second. There was something I wanted to read out. Okay, maybe it's further down. So sorry, I want to talk now about journalism and Alice's contribution to journalism. Are we okay for time, Cara? Yeah, you're nodding there. Okay, thank you very much. I wanted to, of course, put this one first because of my audience, and she wrote many times for the Kerry Man. And this was just one I just got from the newspaper archives. She also was a correspondent for the Irish Press, and in December to write daily reports on the close of the Marian year. Your internet connection is unstable. Are you still hearing me, Cara? Everything okay? Yeah? Yeah, okay. Sorry about the interrupts. In December 1954, the Irish Press sent Alice to Rome to write daily reports on the close of the Marian year. She reported from Rome for the final session of the Second Vatican Council. Alice was commissioned to write weekly reports for local newspapers, the Kerry Man and the Carlo. Apologies to Carlo, that's spelled incorrectly. Alice also wrote a series of profiles of outstanding personage of this Vatican Council to the Universe and the Hibernian Journal. But Alice also wrote about other things. Here, for example, is when she visited New York, she interviewed and did an article on the Irish actress Una O'Connor. And also here, she is an advertisement for a women Renaissance lecture that she gave as well. Again, I just wanted to kind of put these out there in terms of just to demonstrate the different sort of things that she did in terms of journalism. She writes about Ireland and Europe. The above one here is a portrait of the artist as a brother, an interview with James Joyce's sister. The Pompeii of Ireland it was a great story, that one. Edel Quinn, she writes about that as well. And there's many, I mean, too many to put on slides. There's many journal articles that she did. But speaking of journals, one of the journals that she contributed to quite frequently was the well-known Capuchin Annuals. And it was a very kind of, it seems to me anyway, it seemed like a very sophisticated publication for its time. I mean, you know, very good quality photographs, very in-depth articles. But the Capuchin Annuals was published by the Irish Capuchin Franciscans from 1930 until 1977. Although its readership was predominantly Irish, its circulation was international, as was frequently sent to Irish immigrants. And that's a lovely thought for me as well, that writings that my grandmother wrote in this sort of well-known journal were sent off to Australia and America. It's just a lovely thought to have that. It was a journal unique in Irish publishing, containing many literary, historic, photographic, theological, biographical and artistic articles. It claims a readership of 25,000 worldwide at the height of its success in the 1950s. I don't know, but I suspect 25,000 in the 1950s, that sounds like a lot of readerships to me. Maybe not. Maybe I'm a little biased. I wanted to then, there's a wonderful, and I'm not sure, I think I sent you an invite, Brian Kirby. If you're here, welcome. If you're not, I hope you're here. But I do want to thank Brian Kirby. He's the provincial archivist at the Capuchin Annuals, and he has been exceptionally helpful in my research on Alice in relation to her relationship with the Capuchin Annuals. So thank you, Brian. So I asked Brian to just write me a few words, and he wrote last week, through the 1930s and 40s, Alice Curtayne published a series of articles in the Capuchin Annual. Her writings offer striking insights into contemporary attitudes to religious devotion, Irish identity, gender discourses, and their place in the prevailing periodical and print culture of the period. In 1934, the Father Matthew record, I'll just stop there, the Father Matthew record and the Capuchin Annuals are interconnected. I think they used to be called, I'm sorry now, Brian, for not getting this right, but I think the Capuchin Annuals used to be called the Father Matthew record. The Father Matthew record affirmed that Curtayne, deserved the gratitude of the nation for her recent published Life of the St. Bridget of Ireland. The friars expressed a desire to see her publication widely read and commended it to Irish women in particular. And you can see a little image of it there on the right-hand side. It's actually a lovely read. I have a nice little anecdote about that book. In another role, I work in the care industry. I work as a carer, and one of my clients is 95 and he's able to read, and he's in very good shape. And he read St. Bridget recently, and he really enjoyed it. I just thought that was an amazing feeling to get that as well. So the language in the book resonates still. You can see there just a little list from 1933 to 1945, 1946, contributions by Alice on various journal articles in the Capuchin Annuals. So we've kind of talked about journalism and her contribution to journalism. We've talked a little bit about her time in Southampton and Milan. Now we're coming into a kind of let me see, late 30s, early 40s kind of an era for Alice. And in 1935, she married Stephen Rynne, and she married Stephen Rynne romantically so on Valentine's Day in 1935. And maybe even more interesting is she was married by her brother, the Reverend Tom Curtayne, who was the parish priest in Tarbert for many years, and I believe he is buried there. So that was their wedding in 1935, and there's a nice story there too in relation to Alice and Stephen. We're still trying to find it, but Alice and Stephen became acquainted with each other through a letter that Stephen wrote to Alice in relation to her work as a writer. and being kind of almost like fan mail, if you will. And from that, the connection was made. And as they say, the rest is history. Again, just another image of their wedding day. I was talking to Cara earlier and I was commenting on my grandfather's top hat. It looks like a very grand affair. The priest here on the left is Father Tom Curtayne. Now this picture, I hope my father has managed to get online. This picture is one that I would have grown up with this picture. This was an image that was in my house all through my childhood. And if I could ask for your forbearance, I'll just go through some of the people. This is the Alice Curtayne family. On the left here with the dog is Dr. Andrew Rynne from Prosperous in County Kildare. And seated in front is Bridget Ní Rynne, a sculpturist still living in County Kildare. And my late, in the back there is my late Catherine Rynne, who was a writer also, as well as Andrew, actually. Andrew wrote a couple of books and Catherine wrote a few books. She wrote a book on Knock. She was also a social worker. And then the fella there in the middle is my dear father, Davok. And Davok spent his life, and he's still dabbling in it. Antiques, he dealt in antiques his whole life. And of course, Alice there in the blue, and Stephen at the end, looking dapper in his tweed jacket. So that's the Rynne family. These are all my aunts and uncles and my grandparents. So this brings it into the kind of personal, you know, this is where it's at for me, kind of thing. Alice and Stephen spent the majority of their married life in Downing's house in Prosperous, County Kildare, up an avenue, a tree-lined avenue. I wanted to try and find something because there was a lot of talk about this house in terms of what people thought of it. And I was interested to see if I could find anything that Alice said. So Alice called it a Georgian mansion, which is true, in North Kildare, once a bad landlord's stronghold. I'm not sure where that comes from, where we live in the midst of great trees and quiet fields. And I certainly remember as a child the great trees. As a little kind of a side note, it might just be of interest. The first Christy Moore album with Planxty was made in the basement of Downing's, and there's other Christy Moore connections, but that's maybe for another presentation. So that was the kind of a little look at their family life. I want to go on now and talk about Alice's lecture tours of America. And there's a bit of debate about whether it was 3 times or 4 times. It was definitely 2 times. We're not sure if it was 3 or 4 times. So I've put down 4 here anyway, but these were just some of the topics that Alice lectured on when she lectured across America, Ireland Today, marriage, James Joyce in the Catholic Mirror, adventures in hagiology, the 2 Catherines, and Dante and Beatrice. So they were some of the topics. And also, as well as lecturing, she gave a lecture series in a few different colleges, but one in particular was Anna Maria College in Paxton, Massachusetts, where she presented the Modern Fian lectures in 1959. And there's a kind of a little flyer there, and also a program in relation to it. And if you can see, I'm not sure if you can see there, but the cost of it per credit was $15. I thought that was interesting, that you get a credit for Alice Curtayne. It's nice. Again, I just wanted to show, and this was something I found recently, just the sort of the breadth of how much she traveled across America. I mean, you can see there, she was in America from September to December. And between September and December, she went from San Francisco to New York. And I can't help think that, you know, maybe doing that now is easy enough with red-eye flights and all that. But I got to believe in the 1950s, that was probably tough enough going. In the 1950s, Alice lectured across America. In 1959, Alice was awarded an honorary doctorate in humane letters by Anna Maria College, Massachusetts, and granted the freedom of Worcester City. And I'll talk about the doctorate now. So the college presented Alice on the 8th of March 1959 with an honorary doctorate in humane letters. And there she is in that photograph with Sister Irene Marie, the president at the time of Anna Maria College, and the Right Honourable Bishop John J. Wright, who I believe, I'm nearly 100% sure, became a cardinal. This was a this was a big deal for Alice. Alice was very proud of this achievement. And I have to admit, I only found out about it when I was in my 30s before I found out about it. But this was a big deal for Alice. Just coming to the sort of last third part of the lecture now, and this kind of is more where I kind of feel like I have a connection with Alice, because I'm alive and I'm around. And you'll see here in the 1960s, I wasn't born in the 1960s, I was born in the 1970s. And you'll see here this little wooden cabin. She moved from the big house down the avenue and spent her final years in this little wooden cabin. So I remember her living here rather than in the big house. And I suppose my earliest memory of her has got to be around the time where you see that photograph in the 1970s. That's my sister Anya's christening. And I'm the little fella there in the middle. And Stephen is behind with a crutch, and Alice is there. He's helping Alice, but it's at the later stages of their life. But I do remember her. I remember her beautiful speaking voice. I remember her. She had a bit of Parkinson's, so she had that little, that little shake, and she spoke with this sort of authority, kind of regal. You were a little bit afraid of her, but her voice was loud, but she was very fine. She spoke very finely, and very clearly, and used very few words, but there was a softness in her too, a little bit of a messer, a little bit of a joker. But we used to go down to get invited to their house on Sundays for dinner. And it was a kind of, as a 7 or 8 year old, it was a mixture of excitement and nervousness, because you were going down to the house, not the big house, but you were going down to their house where messing wasn't allowed. Oh, something's happened there now. Bear with me, please. Sorry. So I'm moving on now to, again, these are the last kind of publications that Alice did. One was The Life of the Poet, Francis Ledwidge, and an edited book of completed poems by Francis Ledwidge. And I'm going to ask you for forbearance here now. I'm just going to play, because I think it's, for me anyway, it's important to, having a person's voice brings the person, for me, it brings the person alive. And I came across this little interview. I won't play it all, it's 7 minutes long, but I think it's nice to just hear the voice, to hear the sound of the person I'm speaking of. And I'm just going to play you, if I can ask you to bear with me, I'm just going to play this a little bit here now. 1 second now. And Cara, can you give me a thumbs up there if you can hear it, please? Is it going there now? Can you hear it? No, it's not. Okay, bear with me now, folks. And how are we doing now? Is it going now? No, it's not. Now it's going, surely. I wonder, you guys are hearing me. Okay, that's a pity now that this isn't going to work. I'll just be calm about it, and if it doesn't work, I can't understand why we can't hear that. But you're hearing me, but you're not hearing it. Oh.
Who I know has information.
Okay. Just 1 second, please. I asked for your, just 1 second.
Sharing her book on Ledwidge. I asked her how difficult it had been to find the material she needed for her book on Ledwidge.
At the beginning, it was very, very difficult. The people are very talkative in the village, but it's necessary to check and counter-check everything that's told you. Because when they don't know, they have no script about inventing. I found that out. With the best will in the world, they just hate to say they don't know. And you could be led very badly astray. My worst difficulty was his army career. I was almost in despair about that. Because when I started, as far as I was concerned, Frank vanished from sight when he went into Richmond Barracks in Dublin. There was nobody to tell me what personally happened there, And I went to everybody I knew, and then I applied to the army, the Enniskillen Fusiliers. And I got charmingly polite letters from all the lieutenant colonels and brigadier generals and the editor of Shillelagh, the regimental journal. And their courtesy was an example, but their knowledge was nil. And then finally, one of them came forward with the name Bob Christie, who was a retired surgeon dentist had come or counted down. And from the moment I got on to Bob Christie, I was made up, because he was the companion of his the whole way through, as far as Gallipoli anyway.
I kind of feel like I want to hear it all, you know, because it's so lovely to hear, her voice. Like I can see her, you know, I can see her speaking it. So I thank you for that. I just wanted to share that with you. I just want to give this a quick mention, if I could. The National Library in Ireland has a fairly extensive, I think there's 16 boxes of papers from Stephen Rynne and Alice Curtayne, yet to be researched and gone through by myself, but it's there, it's available to the public, and I just wanted to give that a mention there. And now we're coming to the end of the lecture now, and I hope we're okay for time. We are okay, thank you, Cara. So we're now at the, I suppose, a revival, if you will. I mean, that might be a grand word to use, but the revival of Alice Curtayne. And how did we get to this point? How did I come here to be presenting this to you? I, for years, would have known very little about my grandmother. Up until 6 or 7 years ago, I hadn't even read one of her books, because a lot of her books are on hagiology, and for me at the time, that was not of interest to me. And it was only when I delved into them, firstly by reading St. Bridget and a few others, that I really realized, wow, this woman could write. And then I dug a bit deeper and a bit deeper and a bit deeper. And here I am now, and I'm very delighted to be giving this lecture. It's a great honor. But through my sort of research, I had done a website on Alice Curtayne, and I got in touch, somebody got in touch with me the latter part of 2018 or early 2019 maybe, an American publishing company. And Clooney Media are a small publishing company based in the United States, and they are now republishing many of Alice Curtayne's works. And if I could just read this out to you. Clooney has the great privilege to serve as the publisher of Alice Curtayne. Her books are the brilliant output of a vivid imagination, a keen intellect, and the mighty power to portray the human experience in all its mastery and human history in all its complexity. Here comes to mind the opening line in her 1939 novel, House of Cards: "The human mind is inexplicable." Alice Curtayne's respect for that inexplicability shines through her work, but she never ceases to plumb its mysteries. Almost 60 years later, the republication of Alice Curtayne's many great books and a renewed interest in her legacy has borne Clooney up on that wave. For this, we are truly grateful. And that's from the editor-in-chief at Clooney Media, John Emmett Clark. The first book that they've republished was republished last year, House of Cards, which was Alice Curtayne's first novel in 1939. And again, I mentioned this earlier, but this to me is definitely, as I said, she didn't say it, but it's got to be autobiographical. It's just, there's so many linking parallels between the protagonist and Farrell in this book and Alice Curtayne. And if anyone wants to know about Alice Curtayne, I think the secret's in this book. A lovely read, lovely read. This is a collection of short essays, and this was first published by Brown and Nolan in 1934, and again republished by Clooney Media in 2020, Born on the Wind. Irish Story, originally published in 1962, The Irish Story is an absorbing and rewarding narrative of Ireland from its earliest documented days to the mid-20th century, introducing its key people and places and presenting its mythos with heartfelt honesty. Again, first published in 1962 and republished last year. Clooney Media do lovely covers. This is a lovely image here. I think that's probably a Paul Henry image. A very good, I was talking to the publisher about this book. This would make a great school book actually, because it encapsulates the sort of the scope of Ireland and its history and the story of Ireland in a very condensed manner. And then her 1934 book was published last year as well, on Patrick Sarsfield, The Story of the Soldier. It's from this very darkness that the real merit of Sarsfield shines out. He upheld the ancient claim to nationhood, not merely locally, but in the eyes of Europe, and with conspicuous honour and dignity. That was Alice's foreword in that book. Again, 1932, Sheed and Ward published A Recall to Dante, and this book has been published by Clooney Media last year. I think the next book out for them will be, I think Catherine of Siena is going to be the next book that they're going to publish next year. They've finished publishing for this year, and next year they'll be publishing Catherine of Siena. So I'm going to kind of wrap up with this, if I may, please. This year, 2021, is the 40th anniversary of Alice Curtayne's passing. And to commemorate Alice Curtayne, her life, her work, her legacy, this presentation is part of it, but also we've created a plaque, a kind of a commemorative plaque that I'm hoping will be hung at various venues in Tralee and Listowel. And I just want to read out this actually, because I think it kind of brings it all back together, kind of a sort of a, what would you call it, summary. So Alice Curtayne was born again in 1898, and she lived until 1981. Alice Curtayne from Tralee, County Kerry, was first inspired to write while working as a secretary in Milan, Italy during the 1920s. Captivated by the joy and elan of the 14th century saint, she wrote St. Catherine of Siena in 1929. Other writings on saints followed: St. Anthony of Padua, St. Patrick, St. Bridget, and the trial of Oliver Plunkett. Alice's biographies included Recall to Dante, Patrick Sarsfield, and Francis Ledwidge, Life of the Poet. In journalism, Alice contributed to prominent local, national, and regional newspapers and many Catholic periodicals. In the 1950s, she lectured across America. In 1959, Alice was awarded an honorary doctorate in humane letters by Anna Maria College, Massachusetts, and granted the freedom of Worcester City. In 1935, Alice Curtayne married farmer Stephen Rynne, settling in prosperous County Kildare, where they reared their children, Bridget, Catherine, Davok, and Andrew. And the last thing to say is thank you. I want to thank Cara in particular. There's a lot of work that goes into these kind of lectures.
Nice to see you again, Niall.
Oh, there's my father, good man, Davok. I want to thank the Kerry Writers Museum, and I want to thank the Listowel Writers Week. And I'm open to any questions that you might have. Thank you. My email